any business model will work if you can print your own money, which is true of every altcoin. Like you can make any business model work, including, selling database rows for money, which is essentially what an NFT is. You can make any business model work in those sort of environments.
And that's what describing most governments right now.
yeah, exactly. Right. Like, and none of them run efficiently. None of them really benefit anybody. And that's the problem. So you can go to the dark side and, work on all these altcoins, probably make some money. But I would question the effect on your soul.
Welcome to Bitcoin Basics with your hosts, Faris and Gordon. Visit bitcoinbasics.help if you need help buying and securing your Bitcoin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin Basics podcast with your host, Gordon and Faris. And we have a special guest today, which we will interview in a second. Today, at time recording, is the 19th of November. The price of Bitcoin is trading just above $58,000. The block height is 710,304. So, Gordon, we just had a nice conversation with, nice is an understatement, very comprehensive and very well, what's the word I'm looking for? Not over my head. Articulate, definitely. Jimmy Song, we've interviewed before. If you're in Bitcoin space, you'll know who he is. If you don't, Jimmy, like Gordon, comes from a tech developer background, but Jimmy is very, very good at explaining what's going on in the world of Bitcoin. I reached out to Jimmy because on Twitter, on FinTech, been seeing everyone getting excited about this thing called Taproot. So I just want to say, what is Taproot? How does it affect us? And we talked about that and quite a few other things. What was your takeaway, Gordon?
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to speak to Jimmy. He's, as I said, so articulate. He's passionate, and as you said, Faris, he's got an uncanny ability to explain things, simply and concisely. I mean, these things are really complex, and yes, we definitely got into the weeds and highly technical, and even I won't say even a lot of things went over my head as well. But stick with it, even if you sort of don't understand the perhaps minutiae of a lot of the Bitcoin programming and coding. The big picture, innovation and functionality that is coming to Bitcoin is simply amazing. So hopefully you get something out of that, and also the other things that we discuss in terms of, big picture, where's Bitcoin heading and the space in general. So without further ado, Faris, here's the interview.
BitcoinBasics.help is excited to announce our next webinar happening on the 11th and 12th of December 2021, where you'll learn how to buy and sell Bitcoin confidently and securely. Join Faris and Gordon, co-founders of CoinCompass.com and the co-hosts of this podcast, BitcoinBasics.help, to learn more about Bitcoin. Learn more about its fundamentals from an economic and technical point of view. Learn how to buy and withdraw Bitcoin by dealing with wallets and exchanges. And perhaps most importantly, learn about InfoSec and private key management best practices to secure and safely store your Bitcoins for the short and long term. Check out bitcoinbasics.help/webinar to find out more. Fill out the registration form and feel free to ask questions or leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. bitcoinbasics.help/webinar. We hope to see you there.
Jimmy, great to have you back here. Thank you very much, especially at such short notice. One of the reasons I was keen to have you on is I'm on Twitter and I'm seeing Taproot come up a lot. And it seems this is one of those things where insiders are getting very, very excited about. If you're not in the Bitcoin space, Taproot, I don't think refers to an MMF move. So can you just tell our listeners, Jimmy, what is Taproot?
Well, Taproot is a soft fork of Bitcoin. So it gives additional features that, you're not forced to use or anything, but it's available for people to use. It's kind of like Segwit in that regard. Back in 2017, we had this soft fork upgrade to the network that allowed you to do lots of different things, took out malleability and stuff. So the Lightning Network could commence, and we're seeing the fruits of that now. In places like El Salvador and so on. Taproot is kind of similar in the sense that there's a bunch of upgrades to the network. The main things are Schnorr signatures, a couple of additional opcodes, and something called tap script. And this is allowing you to sort of specify different conditions under which you can unlock your coins. And it's done in a very logical way. It's a lot easier to use than the script system, which did allow you to create all kinds of interesting contracts. It's just that it was very easy to screw up, very hard to reason about. And, Taproot makes that a lot easier.
So,
because I know, sorry, go ahead, Gordon.
Did you understand that first? Because we've lost 99% of our audience.
And Gordon's presuming I'm that 99%. Thank you, buddy.
You're welcome.
So with that, I do remember, SegWit coming in and reading a lot about it. So from my understanding and I'm the minority here, I'm the non-tech guy in the room. So my understanding of what SegWit allowed to happen is, it brought in a Lightning Network. And this was at the time, going back a few years, one of the big criticisms of Bitcoin is compared to other currencies, it was criticized for being too slow. Because it did not have instant transaction time. It was 10-minute settlement times, but this brought in the Lightning Network. So this was something that SegWit allowed, bring in Lightning. So building on that, is Taproot and Schnorr signatures, is this going to allow Bitcoin to bring in smart contracts, which I know has been the appeal for people looking at these altcoins?
Well, I mean, smart contracts have been on Bitcoin since the beginning. It's this persistent myth thrown out by Ethereum people that Bitcoin doesn't have them. They've been there since 2009 when Satoshi launched it on the network. In fact, every time you pay to a Bitcoin address, that's actually a smart contract that you're sending money to. It's just locked to a single key or multiple keys, but it's a smart contract saying anyone who can provide a signature for this public key is allowed to spend it. And that, of course, is the person that owns the private key and so on. A similar thing with multi-sig and so on. The scripting language is actually quite extensive. It's just not Turing complete, and for good reason. The Turing completeness allows loops, and it allows it makes it much easier for developers to shoot themselves in the foot. And we see this every day in Ethereum, where somebody made a smart contract badly and it gets exploited, and somebody is able to run off with millions of dollars and coins and stuff like that. That's largely due to the complexity of sort of the scripting system around Ethereum. Solidity is their language. In Bitcoin, the smart contract language is called Script, and it's nice. It's extensive and so on. And I think Satoshi designed it a certain way, or sort of took paradigms from a computer programming language called Forth, because it was a lot easier to sort of implement. But for sort of like what you would call composability, the ability for developers like me to compose a smart contract in a reasonable way, it's hard to reason about. And there have been attempts to make that easier using something like Miniscript, which is Peter Woola's way of simplifying script and making it compiled down to script and stuff like that. But Taproot, I think, changes the ball game significantly and makes it a lot easier to compose these smart contracts, in a way that people actually use them. So Script is a general programming language, like all smart contract platforms. But there's a certain way that we've noticed over the last 10 years that people want to compose these smart contracts. When you're locking up funds, you usually have several conditions, right? Like it's, hey, I want 2 of 3 of these people to sign and that would unlock the funds, or I want it to happen after this period of time and one of these people can then unlock it and so on. There's certain conditions, and they're usually separate conditions, and you can compose that in Script, but it's very easy to screw up and things like that. So the Taproot makes this just incredibly much easier. And to go back a little bit to your comment about SegWit and why it enabled Lightning, SegWit was a bunch of changes at once, and this has been sort of like Bitcoin's model, is that you work on these things and like just sort of push out several things at once as a way to sort of roll in a lot of changes. So SegWit, for example, created a new smart contract type. It was called SegWit. That's the parlance that we're using. But it also did a bunch of other things, like it made the hashing function like less CPU intensive by taking away something called the quadratic hashing problem. It made transactions non-malleable, which was an essential part of allowing something like Lightning to work. It also had block size increase in there, which a lot of people wanted to deny and say it wasn't a block size increase. It was, and that was part of it. Similarly, Taproot has a bunch of things. So Schnorr signatures is one of them. And it allows you to do stuff like batch verification. Again, like if you're running your own node, the current process of verifying a block is fairly CPU intensive. You have to do ECDSA or elliptic curve digital signature algorithm like verifications on a continuous basis. That's a fairly expensive operation. So Schnorr reduces that somewhat because it's using hashes instead of something called field division, which is more CPU intensive. So reduces the CPU load. And on top of that, once you add something like batch verification, it also reduces it significantly. So instead of like verifying each signature, you can batch them. So you can combine them all and just do one verification instead of 30 different or 1,000 different verifications. So there are optimizations like that to make it easier to run a full node and to reduce the load. And that's something that Bitcoin Core has been doing for a long time, is trying to make it so that your ability to audit the entire Bitcoin blockchain is reduced as much as possible, so that you don't have to have like these super machines that you do on, say, Ethereum or Solana or whatever. All of these chains require just enormous computing power, and very few people run them as a result. So it's not in any way decentralized. Whereas with Bitcoin, I could do this on my Raspberry Pi, right? Like with a 1 terabyte hard drive or 500 gigabyte hard drive. And that ability to be able to do that is a very key component of what Bitcoin is about. And Taproot sort of pushes us along those lines. In addition, we get composability. We also get a lot more privacy out of Taproot. So previously, we had two types of addresses. Pre-SegWit, we had the addresses that start with a 1, right? And the addresses that start with a 3. And those are two different types of contracts. You had a single key lock contract, which were the addresses that start with a 1, and then a more flexible one, which is what we call pay-to-script hash, which start with a 3. And those are more complicated contracts. Similarly, after SegWit, we had pay-to-witness pub key hash. These were the ones that start with BC1Q, but were shorter. And then you had the pay-to-witness script hash, which is BC1Q and then longer addresses. So you could tell just by looking at the address, okay, this one is locked to a single key, so I need to just go and steal that one person's key, or this is probably multi-sig, so it's more complicated. With pay-to-taproot, what you get is both of them are combined to one. You have no idea if it's single sig or multi-sig or something in between or something more complicated. And that's the beauty of it, is that you get a lot more privacy. You also only reveal the way, like when you spend the Taproot output and you have like 7 different conditions for being able to unlock that output. you only reveal the one condition that you actually use instead of all 7. Right now, if you're using Script, you have to reveal all 7, and it gives away some of your security when you do that, right? Like, okay, after 3 years, it's only locked to 1 key, at which point, the attacker might wait 3 years and say, okay, like now give me that 1 key. Now I know that I can take it away from you. With Pay to Taproot, it's you only reveal the one thing, so they have no idea if you have this interesting condition that they can take advantage of. So from a security standpoint, it's a nice upgrade as well, because it does preserve privacy and doesn't give away that much.
So yeah, the privacy is something I read about, and I wanted to ask you about that. But first, if you don't mind, so say from people who are using Bitcoin, be it on a store of value or monthly basis, a daily basis, does Taproot actually affect them, or is this like just a software update on their computer that will not change the interface? So for everyday users of Bitcoin, how does this change affect them? Is there something to be excited about in that it opens potential new avenues, potential new industries for Bitcoin?
Yeah, so the main thing that I would say is a benefit to the user, other than your node will run a little faster and things like that, and the requirements to run a node are a little less than they were before, is that you have this ability through Taproot to essentially have a backup path for very, very cheap. So right now on your wallet, what you typically have is a seed phrase. And that seed phrase, can generate all your private keys and so on. So that's what you back up. And say your phone broke and you lost your seed phrase. Good luck to you. You're never going to recover any of those funds. What you have the ability to do with Taproot is you can sort of back things up, and this is really kind of an interesting concept. But you have it locked to a single key. But you also have the second condition, which could be something like, I'm going to trust these 3 people to help me recover my coins should I need them. Like say my phone broke and I lost my seed phrase. I have this ability to back it up. And I can say 2 of 3 of these people need to give me, help me recover, and say that they don't know each other. So there's no possibility that they can collude or something like that. At that point, you have this ability to back it up. And if you do lose it, you can go to them and say, okay, here's the transaction I need you to sign. And if you sign it, then I'm going to be able to recover my funds. And that's a really cool thing, is this ability to sort of like prevent sort of catastrophic loss by like allowing for additional sort of like conditions under which you can recover it. And they could be time locked as well and things like that. So you could say something like, okay, for say I lose it, just so I'm like absolutely secure, like it's only 2 of 3 after a whole year has gone by, right? Something like that. So that way, even if they're trying to collude, they can't unless a year has passed. And you can, design the software in such a way as to make it so that, like as time goes on and as you're using the wallet, the year expiry just keeps moving forward. That way it's like, okay, like this is only in case of catastrophic loss that these people are able to recover funds for me. So there are some really interesting things that can be done within Taproot. The question really at this point is, are the wallet developers going to figure out, how to use this thing in a way that best serves their customers, the users of these wallets? Because there's a whole lot of possibility right now. But it's up to the wallet developers to actually implement these things. So, one of the things that Jameson Law talks about a lot with Casa is gracefully degrading multisig. So you may have 3 of 5 multisig, but you may have catastrophic loss of 3 of the keys, in which case you degrade by saying, okay, after a year, it's only 2 of 5. And after 2 years, it's only 1 of 5 or something like that. that's what you would call gracefully degrading multisig. And you have the ability to compose that within Taproot, and do it in a way that that's still locked to a single key. So it's a very clever way to do everything, and it doesn't, it doesn't cost you that much in terms of backing things up. You do have to back up the Taproot or the mass tree, the Merkleized abstract syntax tree, and at least have the Merkle root available to you at all times so that you can spend from your outputs. But you have this ability to sort of back up your keys in a way, or your UTXOs in a way, and lock it with some conditions to other backup services, if you will.
Yeah, that's actually really exciting because, when we help people getting into Bitcoin, buying it for the first time, that is their biggest concern. They're aware Bitcoins have been lost. And a lot of them, I mean, we think it's exciting that essentially the onus is on you. You're not trusting a third party. New people find that terrifying. They kind of want to trust a third party, and we're trying to teach them not to. So that is actually, from someone who is looking at legacy Bitcoins, that's really, really exciting development. So the one thing is privacy. You kind of answered this. I just want to confirm it, is transactions will become more private or not? Because I know this is a criticism we come across of Bitcoin is it's still used on the dark web. It's still used for money laundering. We're like, no, it's more transparent than anything else out there. Will this kind of fall into that skepticism of Bitcoin that, we now do have private transactions that can't be traced and can potentially be used for nefarious purposes?
No. You're still able to track the Bitcoins because it still works on a UTXO model. So basically, you look at a transaction, you know where the input is and you know where the output is, and you can trace that as much as you can. There's a reason why coin joins are so effective, is because you have this giant transaction with lots of inputs and lots of outputs. You have no idea which input went to which output and so on. That's the idea behind that particular coin join or whatever, this idea of not being able to trace it. But using Taproot normally, you're not really changing that. Although, with Schnorr signatures and signature and pub key aggregation, what you can do is you can have something called cross-input signature aggregation eventually, which would probably be another soft fork away at least, which lets you, which makes it economically incentivized to do coin joins, at which point I think a lot more people will be interested in getting that. So we're not at that level of privacy. The privacy that I'm talking about is how your funds are locked. And it's not at all obvious because you have signature and pub key aggregation. Even a single signature that shows up on chain could be from 7 different people, and it could be 7 different keys or one key. You just really have no idea by looking on chain. So a lot of that data that's on chain right now with multisig, when you have 2 of 3, you have to show 2 different signatures and 3 different pub keys. That kind of goes away with stuff like Musig, where you have no idea. It's just not at all obvious, like by looking on chain. And that's the level of privacy that you get is, okay, the condition under which it was spent. You have no idea of the other conditions. You also have it locked to a single key, but that key can represent 17 different keys. And those are all very privacy preserving and don't give away, sort of from a security standpoint, your key setup or how you spend funds or what you might be doing. So those are all very good things.
So Jimmy, you mentioned quite a few things and a lot of usability and security and privacy, amazing qualities of Taproot. And we could go on and on about them. But to be honest, a lot of users don't really care so much. But from a Bitcoin development point of view, and feel free to plug your course, why should Bitcoin developers care? I mean, there are a lot of developers maybe from the web space, and I don't want to hate on Ethereum and say they're just JavaScript developers. But why should sort of they care about these sort of improvements? Does that make programming Bitcoin easier, or are we going to not see Bitcoin NFTs for another 20 years?
I don't care about Bitcoin NFTs, but the composability of smart contracts is significantly easier. So as a developer, I just put out this tweet, by the way. One of the things I appreciate about Taproot is that you have these conditions that are entirely separate. So they're put into a tap script and they become a leaf of the tap tree that ends up with the taproot, which get combined with the internal pub key to create the taproot pay to taproot address. But you could screw up on any particular leaf as long as the other leaves are fine. You could spend using one of them. So it's a lot more forgiving as a developer, right? Like I've lost so many testnet coins, like, composing something badly. And then it's like, oh crap, now I just lost like 10 testnet Bitcoin. And testnet Bitcoin is actually quite hard to get these days. So that kind of hurts. I have to go begging to IRC channels and, ask for, testnet Bitcoins or whatever. But that sort of thing is made a lot easier in terms of composability, and you can do different things, and it's so much more easier to reason about because we already know how to do like op check sig or something like that. It's very easy. You just put a public key and op check sig, and basically what needs to be provided on spend is a signature. We already know how to do that, and you can have like many of those. But you could also have slightly more complicated ones, like some time and then check lock time verify, op drop, and then op check sig and op check sig and op or pub key and op check sig, something like that, which would be a time lock to a single pub key. So you can compose things a lot easier, and that I think will give it some real utility for being more creative with your smart contract. The other thing that you can that's kind of exciting that may be coming in the future are things like covenants. So Anthony Towns has this very interesting thing on the Bitcoin Dev mailing list about how you can essentially have something like a Taproot mass tree where you own only one of the leaves, and the leaf basically says something like you can prove that what it spends to is the same sort of Merkle tree minus your tap leaf, and it goes back into a very similar contract, basically an opcode like that, and also like op check the value of that output, and you can make it so that the value of the other output is, limited to a certain amount or something like that. And the idea behind that is essentially you could have one UTXO where like 1,000 people have partial ownership of it, right? Like, so you could have 1 million sats in there and 1,000 people have 1,000 sats each in there. And it's all hidden into a single pay to taproot output, which would be really crazy if you think about it, because essentially like an exchange could run that way, right? And they can say, okay, well, this is your balance, and you could, it's you still hold the key, so you can extract at any time. But you're restricted with this covenant that says if you do spend from it, then you have to more or less put it back the same way everybody else's stuff, but you can have your portion. So it allows for some really interesting and creative ways of sort of securing funds on chain, which I think would be, it brings up a whole mess of possibilities, but that's just one of the many ways in which you can extend this idea of Taproot to include some interesting developments. Like I would love to see an exchange do something like that, right? Because at that point, it's still your funds, which is kind of crazy. And the thing is, like, the exchange could sort of like have partial custody. They have to be able to update that mass tree and so on. But there's some really, really cool things that we can do. And yeah, I just, as a developer, I think there's so many possibilities around this. And I don't think we've really fully thought through all of the different ways in which cool things can be made with it.
So far, we've been talking about a lot of the transactional sort of features. And for those sort of non-developers, it's something called script, Bitcoin script. Mm-hmm. If you were Satoshi, I'm assuming, well, I shouldn't assume that you're not Satoshi, but if you were, and you were designing Bitcoin, I'm assuming you wouldn't have used Bitcoin script. Like a lot of people are talking about simplicity. What would you have done differently, Jimmy?
Sorry, I'm just going to butt in very quickly. Sorry, Jimmy, your reaction to that, I'm assuming you're not Satoshi, looked like I've heard this one before.
I have. And I everyone wants to speculate on Satoshi and stuff. It's just like, I don't think that's important. That's all I have to say about that. But with respect to, different scripting language or something like that, I think the script is a good smart contract language in the sense that it's not Turing complete, and it does have sort of like this stack basis, which made it at least easier for Satoshi to reason about, because you have script pub key, which goes here, and you have script sig, which goes there, and you process it a particular way, and it's fairly easy to reason about. You do something a little more complicated, it gets harder to reason about, which is kind of the problem. So I don't know if I were redesigning it from scratch, I would probably use something like simplicity, because it is easier to prove, whether or not something works or not. And you have these primitives that there's only like 7 or 8 primitives within simplicity. And from that, you can compose a lot of different things, and you can prove that it works, and you can reuse those components and other things and so on. So I think something like that would have been really nice. But yeah, like for a first attempt, I think Satoshi did really, really well. I probably wouldn't have made the script language just so extensive. There are like 150 opcodes or something like that, and most of which don't get used at all. But they're still sort of like a QA burden on Bitcoin developers whenever they're doing a new release, making sure that the interactions aren't going to cause anything crazy, stuff like that. So, like I would love to see the script like reduced to, or change possibly to, something that's a lot easier to prove the security of. So like security is number one, like that. Like this is why Ethereum is a joke, right? Like, because they have no security proofs or anything. It's basically a Turing complete language that is extremely hard to analyze. This is why you get so many bugs and so many ways in which people exploit things. With something that's provable, right? Like when you have a better smart contract language that's more analyzable and stuff like that, and especially if it's not Turing complete, that's a lot easier. And that's the direction that we want to be able to go in, because it's people's money at stake, and we don't want like move fast and break things on this sort of thing. You don't want people to lose their money. So hopefully that answers your question.
Is there a framework or SDK, whatever you call it, where we can kind of compromise? I know we're talking about security is number one, and I've talked a lot on our podcast that, complexity is the enemy of security, and the more complex you make something. But is there some sort of happy medium where we can sort of maintain that security, but still sort of extend the functionality somehow?
Yeah, so I think simplicity would be it. That's been sort of like Blockstream's dream for quite a while. And I believe they are, doing a soft fork of that on the Liquid network. But that idea behind simplicity is that instead of opcodes, you have these functions And there are very few of them. And mathematically, it's very easy to prove whether or not something is secure or whatever, because you know all the outputs. It's not Turing complete. So you can enumerate the outputs, and based on those outputs, you can check and say, okay, that is something that's reasonable, or that's not, because there's obviously a vulnerability here, and so on. This is the stuff that Ethereum absolutely sucks at, right? Like they had, I think, a multi-sig bug where you could do 0 of 0. It's insane. That's something that wasn't caught, first of all, but it's possible because you can't analyze script. It's not script. You can't analyze Solidity that easily. And all these altcoins try to do these analytical languages like OCaml and stuff where you can prove it, but it's still very difficult. So you have this ability to if you have this ability to prove the security of something, that's a big win. And that's something that we should definitely be concerned about when we're talking about things of value, right? Like this is digital value. You have to put security first. I do think that you can get simplicity in sort of a soft fork. What you would have to do is make it like SegWit V3 or something like that. That's a couple of soft forks from now. And you would have in the witness field, the actual simplicity contract in there. And you would have to extract that data and use that to determine, okay, what the actual contract is, and run it through the script. And instead of running it through the script virtual machine, which executes the smart contract, you would have a separate virtual machine altogether for simplicity that would execute that. And it would be a special rule. It would have to be a soft fork and so on. But that's entirely possible. That's something that I think would be very exciting. You can have different signature schemes and stuff like that. One of the things that Adam Back points out is if we had simplicity on Bitcoin, then you wouldn't need a soft fork for Schnorr signatures. You would just compose a Schnorr signature scheme using simplicity, and then just go from there. I believe it would be possible to have entirely different elliptic curves for stuff. And people talk about quantum, and that nauseates me to death. But you could compose a quantum proof signature scheme. That it would be really, really long, but it would be possible with something like simplicity to do, because you can, you got these basic building blocks, and you would be able to code it. You'd be able to prove its security and move from there. So there's so many ways in which something simpler and easier would work. Now there are other considerations, like the fact that your CPU would have to be able to render all this stuff and run it in a reasonably fast way. And I don't know how fast that would be. I suspect that it would be fairly fast, but right now with script, it's there are a few really, really expensive operations, but most of them are not expensive. So checking a signature is very expensive, which is why we have something called the SIG-op limit and stuff like that. So you're only allowed to run the signature part of any transaction like so many times before it's considered non-standard, or it sort of quits, even if the whole script is valid. If you do too many signature operations, the blocks won't accept them and so on. So there are subtle things like that we'd have to consider, which is probably why it's not on Bitcoin yet. And yeah, there's but that would be one way to sort of expand the functionality significantly.
Yeah, I just want to jump in real quickly here, guys, because this is something for our non-tech based listeners. you really should appreciate conversations like these, because if Jimmy and Gordon were working for a central bank, or if they're working for a private bank, this is a conversation they could not be having publicly. They can be sharing it. So this is the beauty of decentralization, and why with Bitcoin you have so many people working on it. And it's $1 trillion industry, and top 15 currency in the world. And I just love that you guys can have these conversations and talk about what is best for the network, what is best for security. Whereas if you were working in any other capacity, private, public industry, you couldn't have these conversations out in the open. So from our listeners, this is just something that is astronomical to me. That's, hey, this is what these guys are talking about. And what are they trying to do? Protect the network. And as Jimmy says, keep your funds safe. Mm-hmm. So sorry, that was my 2 cents.
Yeah, and keep the decentralization, right? Like that's a big part of the value of Bitcoin, is that I can audit the entire Bitcoin blockchain, which is huge. I am able to do that at any point, and we need to make sure that gets easier over time and not harder. And the fact that I could do it with a Raspberry Pi is pretty reasonable. But if I wanted to do that with like an EOS node, like that's literally like a $100,000 machine or something like that to validate their chain. It's like no one's going to do that. That's why it's not decentralized. It's a completely centralized chain, and every other chain is like that because they've given up decentralization in favor of being able to control things centrally. And that does bring some benefits in the sense that you can upgrade things faster and move, like hype different things and so on. But that's not what we do in Bitcoin, because it's actually money.
I like to use the example of, take any large conglomerate, large business, the most important department, people realize, is the IT department. These are the guys running your webpage, running your payment services, running everything. These are the most important guys in business. And what do? I'll put them in the basement.
Yeah. And many a company has suffered significantly because, they weren't able to upgrade their IT departments and things like that. So, yeah. You got some weird stuff there.
Yeah, I just want to go back to what you said before about the chains. I dabbled in a little bit of altcoin development a few years ago. Forgive me, Father, I've sinned. But they don't. And you've talked many times, Jimmy, about the importance of running a node and decentralization. I'll just reiterate that, because I don't think people understand how important it is to be able to download a blockchain to verify it by yourself on consumer hardware, on hardware that costs $10, $20 instead of a lot of these altcoins. Ethereum, for example, what is it, up to about $4,000, $5,000 with expensive SSDs and CPUs or whatever. And a lot of these altcoins don't actually do on-chain verification anyway. Their apps don't connect directly to the blockchain. A lot of these projects, a couple that I worked on, they were indexing stuff in databases anyway. So all these apps were looking at a database. They weren't even looking at a blockchain. But that's a separate story. Mm-hmm. For any developers out there listening to this, because you're probably the only ones who are sort of left, why should someone develop in Bitcoin? Let's say someone knows a bit of Python or JavaScript or something like that. It seems like the barrier to entry is pretty high. And I want your rebuttal here, because you run a programming Bitcoin course, but it just seems like the barrier of entry is really high, and to get to Ethereum or some of these other altcoins seems pretty easy to download an SDK and get started. So why should someone program Bitcoin?
Yeah, good question. The thing is, like, all this, the reason I would give is not, hey, it's much easier on Bitcoin. It's not. I think you made that case. They've made it extremely easy on Ethereum to create an NFT, for example, right? Like it's like, you fill in a template on some ERC standard and that's it. That's not really coding though. That's really just like filling out a form, right? And the thing is, with all these altcoins, they've made it very easy to sort of like hype up your stuff. And that's their whole business model. So I wouldn't give sort of like it's easier to program on Bitcoin argument. The argument I would give is, you're working on a scam versus you're working on something real. And the thing is, like, any business model will work if you can print your own money, which is true of every altcoin. Like, you can make any business model work, including, selling database rows for money, which is essentially what an NFT is. You can make any business model work in those sort of environments.
And that's what describing most governments right now.
yeah, exactly. Right. Like, and none of them run efficiently. None of them really benefit anybody. And that's the problem. So you can go to the dark side and, work on all these altcoins, probably make some money. But I would question the effect on your soul, right? Like, I saw a tweet not too long back about how there are so many like developers that have made a ton of money working for these altcoins or whatever, and they're massively depressed. Now, ask yourself, why is that? I thought money is supposed to make you happy or something like that. That's not the case, right? Like, if you earn money legitimately, where you're providing value to others, and you have provided a good or service that other people can enjoy or use or make their lives better in some way, that's huge, right? That's building up civilization. And deep in your heart of hearts, you know it when you've done that. When you're not doing that, what are you? Well, you're a rent seeker. You're somebody that's just sort of like extracting resources, taxing some transaction without providing any value whatsoever. And deep in your heart of hearts, you know that too. And this is why these people are depressed, or at least that's why I believe they're depressed, is because they've made money, but they've done so in a way that extracts resources and tears down civilization instead of providing goods and services to greater civilization and builds it up in some way. And those that's a crucial distinction. We're told basically that, all money, like, whatever you can do to make money, that's fine. I really don't think that's the case. If you make money in one way, it's not going to be very satisfying. Whereas if you make money in another way, it is going to be satisfying. And that would be the argument that I would give for working on Bitcoin instead of all this other stuff. If you're letting sort of like ease of getting into it as the main criteria for why you're coding in it, then I think you really need to look at your goals and sort of like do a lot of self-reflection on what's actually valuable to you. Because you can make a lot of money and be completely miserable, or you can make less money and be, a lot more joyful with your life. So yeah, that would be my answer.
I mean, a lot of people that I speak to and even around here, blockchain engineers, the best case scenario is you're just creating a really expensive, really slow, a database. Mm-hmm. And, best case scenario, you're basically scamming your clients. You're mm-hmm. charging them, 100 times, just, download a Linux server, MySQL and Apache and create some PHP code and you're done. Why spend $100,000? But everyone's doing, every single, maybe not small, but medium to large business in the entire world is doing some sort of R&D project, whether it's a public blockchain, private, whatever, based on Ethereum, whatnot. And they're spending millions of dollars. My brother works for a very large car manufacturer that everyone knows. And they've spent about 200 million in the last 2 years on an R&D project that they're basically just now going to scrap. And I was talking to him before they were doing this. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you're just creating a really expensive, a really slow, and a really insecure database that is a nightmare to maintain. You're already using commercial systems like SAP and Oracle databases. Just use that. It's fine. I just don't see the use cases for it. But yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm legally changing my name to Blockchain Ferris. You guys want to invest?
Sure.
It is this whole phenomenon of rent seeking that becomes much more prevalent in a fiat monetary system. And I complain, for example, about the TSA. It's never been about security at an airport. it's just a bunch of make work jobs, right? It's digging a hole and filling it back up again. That's essentially like what all of those people are hired for. It doesn't stop terrorist attacks or anything like that. All it does is make it, tax every plane air travel passenger with like additional 30 minutes that they have to go in and out of those things. And that's the tax that everyone is paying for these people to get work, basically. And that's all it is. And that's kind of what you're becoming if you do become a blockchain consultant or an altcoin developer or something like that. It's you're basically taxing these ecosystems where they're printing their own money, and those are really stealing from the people that are stupid enough to get in, I guess.
Couldn't agree more. So someone, Jimmy, I'm just going back to this because we've got a bit of a programming theme tonight. If someone did want to get back in, if someone wanted to get into Bitcoin, are there any, apart from your course, which feel free to plug, are there any libraries, repositories? What are some starting points for people to get in?
Yeah, depends on what you want to do. So there's a lot of interest in doing stuff on the Lightning Network, for example, and there's a lot of exciting developments there. There's a lot of different developer tools for that, for example. So I think there's a whole SDK for Lightning, basically, where it'll set up like a whole Lightning infrastructure, including many nodes, and you can essentially run your own node and within this sub testnet kind of place, and you can do all sorts of things and test it and make sure it works and stuff like that. There's also I think it's called BDK or something like that Square puts out. That it's a developer kit for Bitcoin developer kit for Bitcoin. I think they also have like a Lightning equivalent or something like that. So there's a lot of different ways to get in. It depends on, what programming language you are familiar with or are comfortable in, what aspect of, the Bitcoin ecosystem that you want to do something in. So if you're a wallet developer, that's very different than if you want to do protocol development or Lightning development or something like that. There's all sorts of different aspects to it. And, it really depends on that. But, there's a lot of resources out there, and they're Google search away. So, yeah, obviously I have a book on the protocol level stuff, Programming Bitcoin by O'Reilly. And, I teach that stuff as well with my seminar. So, if you want to learn that stuff from me, sign up for my course.
Cool. Well, I'm all out of questions. Gordon, did you have anything else you want to ask Jimmy?
I just wanted to know, are we talking to the real Jimmy Song? I think you've had a few problems with impersonators of late. Are we talking to Jimmy Song?
I guess I can do a PGP signature for you based on my Twitter profile. It's this has been a problem for like 4 years now, and Twitter still refuses to give me the blue check mark. So what can I do?
Are you looking at any? I know this is like the eternal question, but are you looking at any other sort of social media, email, cloud storage, sort of self-hosted or decentralized solutions?
I would love to see Umbrel do something like that, because I have one of their nodes. I would love to plug it in and download my own mail server, my own photo sharing storage place or something like that and stuff like that. That would be awesome if I can have something like that running on my own thing. And then maybe if they, if it was open source, I can put it on my phone. That way I can, access my photo storage or my mail server, or if it uses an open protocol or something, I can have a client on my phone that connects directly and downloads them. That would be ideal. we're not there yet. I would love to have control over my own data. I also want a calendar that isn't like completely controlled by Google and stuff. But we're not there yet. But I do think we'll get there, because we now have bootstrapped this idea of running your own server with a Bitcoin node number one, then a Lightning node, and you keep adding stuff to that, and next thing you know, you're almost self-sovereign on a digital level, which would be amazing.
I can see. Sorry, Gordon, I'm going to jump in. Gordon's chapping at the bit here, Jimmy, and this is something me and him have been talking about for the last 2 months. Is basically the coming age of decentralization, where people realize my entire identity, not just digital identity, but who I am, is out there. How do I take control of that? And what you just said, sovereign, is something we've been talking about. So yeah, I'll just let Gordon attack you right now.
No attacks at all. It's a journey.
No, when I say attack, I mean, you're very excited about this. So sorry.
It's a journey I've been going through the last 2-3 months of self-hosting my own stuff. So I've been setting up, my own email server, which, by the way, don't try it. It's a nightmare to manage and maintain. Setting up, cloud storage like Nextcloud and all kinds of stuff. But then there's so many rabbit holes you go down to, because you want to be self-sovereign and host stuff by yourself. But then you put everything, you put your full node, you put your Lightning node, you put stuff on your own server. And then you're like, now I've got everything on the one server. That becomes a single point of failure. So I'm like, now I need other servers in other locations. And now you have to not only decentralize, you have to distribute your servers around the globe as well and do mirroring and stuff like that. So it's a never-ending rabbit hole you go down.
Well, so I mean, this is where providers can definitely help you, right? Like, and this is why I want Umbrel to go and make, or somebody to make an Umbrel app that basically does a lot of that for you and lets you run your own mail server and get nice new features. I'm even willing to pay for a software license so that it's all sort of done in a nice way and so on. So I think that's coming. I think it's just going to require people like us to demand it of the market. People are just so used to getting things for free, and they're willing to give up all manner of privacy to do it. But as we move towards that data kind of getting abused by Google and Facebook and all these other places, I think there are going to be people that are going to demand better, control, and ultimately that's going to be self-hosted stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking at I'm just finishing some studies, and I was sort of looking at a project sort of post this, and I'm a sort of a bit of a developer, more on the back end than the front end, but I was sort of looking for projects, and I was like, I love all this self-hosted stuff, but a lot of the stuff doesn't integrate any Bitcoin stuff, which is really disappointing. So I think I've found my niche in terms of setting up, self-hosted cloud storage, mail, and that kind of stuff, integrating, say, Lightning or something like that. So all that stuff is just fascinating, and it's definitely the way forward. So I was looking at last time we interviewed Jimmy, which was January the 12th, I think, or 12th or 13th. Seems like this is the year of sort of inflation and money printing gone wild. What do you reckon next year's got in store for Bitcoin?
I reckon that it'll be just as crazy. We just had a $1.7 trillion infrastructure bill that just passed. No money to pay for it. So I think we're going to see more money printing. I think people are going to complain about prices. I think there's going to be more stimulus checks that are going to go out. Like prices on everything are going to continue to go up. It's not going to be transitory. That's about as accurate as 2 weeks to, flatten the curve or something like that. It's another lie that they're telling us so that we stay compliant or something. But yeah, I can't imagine the next year being any different or better, because Democrats are going to want like some way of saying, hey, like, look what we've done for you. They're already sending out like child, care. I forget. Like there's some checks that they're sending out for that reason. So yeah, the money can. I don't see it stopping, and they can't raise rates because like entire bond markets will collapse and stuff. So they're caught between a rock and a hard place, and that's what happens when you keep printing money.
Yeah. Inflation is no longer an emerging market problem. It's now hitting people in everyday walks of life, and even if they don't understand it, they know something is wrong. Cool. Well, thank you very much, Jimmy. And we'd love to have you back on again. This theme you just brought up, decentralization, is something we're working on here. So if it's okay, if maybe 6 months down the line, we'd love to get back on and talk specifically about that.
Let's do it.
Thank you, Jimmy. Always a pleasure.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Jimmy.
you, guys.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for watching or listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share so we can spread this educational content to others like yourself. Visit bitcoinbasics.help.
Disclaimer. Any content provided by CoinCompass is for educational and informational purposes only and is not investment, legal, tax, or any other professional advice. A qualified professional should be consulted before making any financial decisions. CoinCompass will at times recommend certain products, services, and technologies, but these are opinions based upon our own or podcast guests' experience and not endorsements. We take no liability for out-of-date or inaccurate information, software bugs, manufacturing errors, technology misuse, or issues involving third parties. Visit coincompass.com for more information and please contact us.